In today's class, we will be discussing about the invasive arterial pressure monitoring. So here in this diagram, it is showing the typical arterial waveform. It's showing a systolic pressure, dicrotic notch and the diastolic runoff. So what are the uses of an invasive arterial pressure monitoring? We all know invasive arterial pressure monitoring is the gold standard for monitoring blood pressure. Why? Because it helps in a continuous monitoring of the blood pressure, and also beat to beat variation in BP can be made out using this invasive arterial pressure monitoring. And also because since there is an arterial line present, we can do frequent sampling of blood gas analysis can be done through that port. So what is the ideal site for measurement of intra-arterial pressure? It is the ascending aorta, but it will not be feasible most of the time. So we always go for a peripheral line. So what happens to the arterial pulse waveform as we move from a central artery like aorta to a peripheral artery like the dorsalis pedis or radial? So what happens is that as the waveform moves from the center to periphery, the systolic blood pressure increases, the diastolic BP decreases, the dicrotic notch disappears, and there will be a delay in transmission because one is recorded at the center and another one is near to the heart and another one is away from the heart. So in this diagram we can see that the aortic root is having a waveform like this, while a dorsalis pedis is having a waveform which is more conical, which lacks a dicrotic notch, which is having a higher systolic blood pressure and a lower diastolic blood pressure. So systolic blood pressure increases and diastolic reduces, and dicrotic notch disappears in a peripheral artery, while the systolic will be less while the diastolic will be more, and there will be visible dicrotic notch in a central artery. So why is it so? That is because in the peripheries the arteries have a reduced compliance, and also there will be reflectance and resonance of the pressure waves in arterial line in the periphery. So these are the causes for a change in the waveform. So how much change in systolic and diastolic occurs as we move from a center to periphery? That is, there will be a 10 to 20 millimeter increase in systolic BP, 10 to 20 millimeter fall in diastolic blood pressure, while the mean arterial pressure remains the same as that in a central artery. So why we monitor central artery pressure like femoral artery, then a peripheral artery like radial artery after separation from CPB? Because after separation from CPB, the mean arterial pressure in peripheral artery can be significantly lower than the central aortic pressure for a period of time. So we always go for a central artery monitoring after separation from CPB for some time, maybe because of the vasoplegia which occurs at the peripheral artery. So MAP can be lower in a peripheral artery immediately after separation from a cardiopulmonary bypass. So what is the most useful parameter when assuming overall end organ perfusion? It is the mean arterial pressure. So we always should go with the mean arterial pressure. So how is the mean arterial pressure measured? It is measured by integrating the arterial waveform tracings over time. Otherwise also we can calculate mean arterial pressure by this formula, that is systolic plus 2 into diastolic, the whole divided by 3. So what are the components of an intra-arterial pressure measurement system? So it includes the fluid-filled rigid tubings and connections, a electromechanical transducer, electronic storage and display systems, that is a monitor, and also an electronic analyzer. So in this diagram we can see the intra-arterial cannula, the guide wire, and the initial puncture needle which we use for accessing the arterial line. So what are the characteristics of an intravascular catheter used for intra-arterial pressure monitoring? So ideally, the catheter should be short. There should not be much length. Catheter should be short and should be a narrow gauge, should be less than 20 gauge. This is because to reduce the resistance. Otherwise, if there is a resistance inside the cannula, then there can be reduction in the recorded values of the BP measured. So as per Poiseuille's law, it should be short, broad, it should be short and narrow. And such catheters are should be less thrombogenic. What is an end pressure artifact? So it is an artifact which occurs in association with an intra-arterial catheter. Why an end pressure artifact occurs? Because the blood, this waveform will be transmitted through the artery. So inside the artery we have a catheter. So when this waveform encounters a catheter, there will this waveform will comes to the flowing blood comes to a sudden halt at the tip of the catheter. So this sudden halt can increase the pressure. So there will be an added pressure of 2 to 10 millimeter, and this is known as end pressure artifact. Now we will discuss what is Fourier analysis. So we know that in the first diagram it is the arterial. Usually the arterial pulse waveform will be like this, so in Fourier analysis, this complex waveform, we can consider this complex waveform as a combination of different sine waves. So this complex waveform is broken down into its constituent sine waves. So this complex waveform will have a fundamental frequency and a harmonic frequency. So this fundamental frequency means there will be a base frequency, like if it is 1 Hertz or 2 Hertz, and this harmonics will be multiples of this fundamental frequency. So by analyzing these individual sine wave forms, the intra-arterial BP is measured in an intra-arterial blood pressure monitoring system. So the process of analyzing the complex waveform in terms of its constituent sine waves is known as Fourier analysis. So it will have a fundamental frequency, fundamental wave, and a series of harmonic waves. Usually the fundamental wave will be the pulse rate. So now we will see what is the natural frequency. So when a particular amount of energy is transmitted to a system, that system will oscillate at its maximum amplitude. That oscillation which occurs at maximum amplitude will have a particular frequency, and that frequency is known as the natural frequency. That is, the frequency at which every material oscillates freely is known as the natural frequency, and in its natural frequency that system will oscillate with the maximum amplitude. So that is so every system will have a natural frequency. So this natural frequency, so if what happens is, if a particular there are two systems, and one has a particular frequency, a natural frequency, and the other one is when it also have the same natural frequency, what happens is the energy of the two systems, the other system will get transferred to this energy of the oscillating system A get transmitted to the energy of the oscillating system B, because both the oscillation frequencies are same. So if the natural frequency of two system matches, then both the system will oscillate with a larger amplitude. So that phenomenon is known as resonance. So resonance will have many applications, clinical applications. It has good advantages as well as disadvantages. Because of the resonance happened, only one bridge collapsed when the soldiers were marching over the bridge. So when the soldiers were marching on the bridge, the frequency of their march matched with the natural frequency of the bridge. That resulted in oscillation of the bridge in a larger amplitude, which finally resulted in the collapse of the bridge. So that is a problem with when two systems oscillates with the same frequency. That is, a resonance happens between two systems. That is a problem. While there are clinical uses, like if in our ear the basilar membrane, the base of the basilar membrane will oscillate at a lower frequency. So when sounds of lower frequency strikes the basilar membrane, that part of the base of the basilar membrane resonates and create large amplitude waves. While if the apex of the basilar membrane vibrates at a higher frequency. So when high frequency sounds reach the basilar membrane, the apex of the basilar membrane oscillates and produce and resonates, and that will and high frequency sounds are interpreted through the apex of the basilar membrane. So this is a natural frequency. So every system will have a natural frequency. So in an intra-arterial blood pressure measurement system, what should be the natural frequency of that system? So we know the arterial waveform which is transmitted through the blood vessels during pumping of the heart will have a particular frequency. So if that frequency matches with the frequency of the intra-arterial blood pressure system, what happens is there will be resonance between two, and there will be a large amplitude waveform which results. So the two systems will resonate, and that will distort the original arterial pulse waveform. So that will result in a wide pressure and erroneously high systolic BP results. So ideally, the intra-arterial blood pressure monitoring system should have a very high natural frequency than the arterial blood pressure waveform. So usually it should have at least 8 times the natural frequency of the arterial waveform. So if a patient is having a heart rate of around 180, then the natural frequency of the intra-arterial blood pressure system should be 180 into 8 divided by 60, that is it should be 24 Hertz. Because otherwise if it is matching, then the waveform get distorted, we get a wide pulse pressure and erroneously high BP will result. So the IABP, that is intra-arterial blood pressure system, should have at least 8 times the fundamental frequency of the arterial waveform, which is equivalent to the pulse rate. So what are the factors which increases the natural frequency? So to increase the natural frequency in an intra-arterial blood pressure system, what all things we can do? We can reduce the length of the cannula or tubing, reduce the compliance of the diaphragm of the transducer, reduce the density of liquid inside the tubing, and also by increasing the cannula diameter or the tubing. So usually the commercially available intra-arterial blood pressure monitoring systems have a natural frequency of 200 Hertz, but it is reduced by three-way taps, bubbles, clots, and also additional length of the tubings. So how can we measure the natural frequency in a clinical setting? So that is by the fast flush test. So when you flush the arterial blood pressure system with a high pressure saline flush, what happens is that there will be an overshoot and an undershoot wave which resonates with the natural frequency of the system. So as shown in this diagram. So when we flush it, there will be an overshoot wave and an undershoot wave, and this the resonance frequency will be equal to the natural frequency of the system. So this natural frequency we can calculate by dividing the sweep speed or screen speed divided by the wavelength of this undershoot and overshoot wave. So in this diagram we can see that the paper speed is 25 millimeter per second. So the natural frequency is 25 divided by the wavelength, which is equal to 1 millimeter. So here the natural frequency of this system is around 25 Hertz. So this is how the natural frequency is measured in a clinical setting. So now we will see what is damping. So resonance is that amplification of the energy, while damping is that attenuation of the energy. So if there is something which reduces the energy in an oscillating system, that will result in a reduction in the amplitude of the oscillations, and that is known as damping. So some degree of damping is required in all system, while there are problem with if there is a system is over damped or if it is under damped. And the most common cause of damping is, as like in any other systems in physics, we can understand that it is the friction in the fluid pathway. So the other factors which increase damping include three-way stopcock, clots, bubbles in the system, vasospasm, kinks in the tubings, or if there is a narrow or long compliant tubings, also damping will be increased. That is, the energy will be dissipated inside the system. So how can we measure a damping coefficient? For measuring the damping coefficient in a system, so by understanding the damping coefficient also we can say whether it is an underdamped, overdamped or critically damped system or optimally damped system. So for that also we use the fast flush test. Fast flush test is used. So when you flush the system with a high pressure saline through the flushing port, what happens is there is an overshoot wave and an undershoot wave will be there, which resonates at the natural frequency. So to measure the damping coefficient, we divide the amplitude of the smaller wave with the amplitude of the larger wave. So in this case it is A2 divided by A1. So in this we can see that A2, the waveform is around 1 to 2.5 millimeter. This much is the amplitude of A2. Divided by A1 amplitude is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it is 2.5 divided by 8, that is around 0.31. So corresponding to an amplitude ratio of 0.3, we have a damping coefficient of 0.36. So this is an underdamped system. This we will discuss from the further slides. So this is how we calculate the damping coefficient. So what is a critically damped system? So critically damped system is one which there will not be any overshoot when you flush the system with a high pressure saline. So that is a critically damped system is one in which minimal amount of damping which is required to prevent any overshoot. So usually in a critically damped system the damping coefficient is 1, And the problem with the system is, even if there is a change in the arterial blood pressure, that will not reflect in a critically damped system, because it is very slow to respond, and also there will not be any change if there is a change in the system. While what is an overdamped system? Overdamped system, the damping coefficient will be more than 1. So what happens is, there will be too much resistance inside the system, and the system will not oscillate freely. And in an overdamped system, the systolic BP will be low and the diastolic BP will be high, and the system will not overshoot. So it is more than critically damped. That is overdamped system. While in an underdamped system, there will be too much of overshoots on flushing the system, and here the damping coefficient is less than 0.7, and in this case the systolic BP will be very high, while the diastolic BP is under. So what is an optimally damped IABP system? Optimally damped is that one which has a damping coefficient around 0.7, and such a system provides the best balance between the speed of response and recovery. And for ideal recording of blood pressure, we should have a optimally damped IABP system. So now we will discuss about the transducers. Transducers are system which convert one form of energy into another. So in an intra-arterial blood pressure monitoring system, it is the mechanical energy which is converted into an electrical signals. So how it is done? That is, a fluid column moves because of the displacement caused by the arterial pulse, and that will stretch a diaphragm, and the diaphragm is attached to a strain gauge. When the diaphragm gets displaced, the strain gauge which is attached to the diaphragm will measure this displacement, and this strain gauge is a part of the Wheatstone's bridge. So when the strain gauge gets displaced, there will be a change in the resistance of the system in the Wheatstone's bridge, and that will cause a change in the there will be a change in the potential difference, and a current will flow through it, and that will produce a corresponding corresponding waveform or signal will be produced. So strain gauge principle is that so this diaphragm in the transducer is attached to a strain gauge. So the strain gauge is either made up of a wire or a silicon. So the electrical resistance of the wire or the silicon increases with increasing stretch. So as the diaphragm is stretched, the strain gauge gets stretched and the resistance of the system increases. So and this strain gauge is a part of the Wheatstone's bridge. So if you balance the Wheatstone's bridge, there is no current flow, because the R1 by R2 is equal to R3 by R4, and there will be balanced resistance on both sides, and there will not be any potential difference, and no current will flow. So when there is a displacement occurring in the diaphragm, that will cause a corresponding stretching in the strain gauge, which causes a increase in the resistance in the one arm of the Wheatstone's bridge, which produces a potential difference in that bridge, and that will result in a current flow. So because of the diaphragm movement, the strain gauge gets stretched or compressed, and the resistance will be altered. So this is the basic circuit. Wheatstone's bridge is the basic circuit used in an intra-arterial blood pressure transducer. So that is used to measure the unknown resistance, and initially it was only one strain gauge, only one of the resistance arm was a strain gauge, but these days all the four resistance arms are strain gauge. All four strain gauge are incorporated in the Wheatstone's bridge, and that is more sensitive, 4 times more sensitive, and also it is not temperature, it does not changes with the temperature also. So this is such Wheatstone's bridge are available. That is all four strain gauge Wheatstone bridge are used in the transducers these days. So now we will have a word about zeroing and leveling. Zeroing the transducer is to expose the transducer to atmospheric pressure and calibrate it to zero, so that at the level of the atmospheric pressure is not added to it, and it is made at it is calibrated at the level of zero. Calibrated to zero. In calibrating, that is in zeroing a transducer, the level is never important, and this should be done multiple times a day to avoid distortion in the blood pressure measurement. While leveling is important. Level is done to make the BP measurement at the level of the patient's heart. Leveling is usually done at the level of patient's heart at the 4th intercostal space in the mid-axillary line. So otherwise error can occur, because if the level is too low, there will be an increase in the hydrostatic column which is being measured in addition to the blood pressure. So there can be an increase in the BP if the level is too high, too low. While if the level is too high, there will be reduction in the hydrostatic column and the BP measured can be low. So too low, the level, the transducer overreads. If the too high the level, transducer underreads. So that is, it is like for every 10 centimeter change, there will be a 7.4 millimeter change in the blood pressure. So these are the important concepts which we should understand in an intra-arterial blood pressure management system. Thank you.